welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloney. I'm the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for the Texas Elementary Principal Association. And each week, I seek to bring you different guests who have inspired, encouraged, or challenged me in one way or another, and allow them an opportunity to share some of their story with you. I am thrilled this week to have my very special guest, Cassie Stephens. Cassie, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Hey, I am an elementary art teacher. I teach kindergarten through fourth grade art. I've been teaching art just if you're familiar with Tennessee in the Nashville area, I teach in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a town about 15 miles south of Nashville. And I've been teaching art for 21 years, which you would never
Wow, I did
guess
not
by my
realize it was that
usual.
long.
I
I
know. Well,
really
in
wouldn't
Tennessee,
have
we
guessed
have
that.
different laws. Yeah, I've been teaching since I was 12 because we do things differently here. But yeah,
I like
21
that.
years. I started in 98, in the 90s,
Wow. Well,
before things like this, before podcasts and blogs. And like I had to look through books and go to the library.
have you done art the entire time?
Yes.
I love that. So,
I've only taught K through 4 art for 21 years. You think I'd be much better at it, but I'm not.
no, let me
I'm a
tell you,
slow learner.
if you are not following Cassie on Instagram, you are missing out. Like, I'm not even an art teacher, but I love following your stuff because I'm like,
Thank you.
ooh, how, I mean, because I'm like taking your ideas and using that with like administrators or with my school or different things like that because they're just such good ideas that are applicable even if you're not an art teacher because as you know and I'm sure you'll attest is that art needs to be incorporated into everything that we do, and so the more we can do that as educators, the better. And so I love your work. So go follow Cassie on Instagram if you're not, first of all. But talk to me a little bit about being an art teacher. Is that always a path you knew you wanted for yourself?
No, no. And in fact, I'm glad that you said what you did because, when I was growing up in elementary school, I never had art. And so I really struggled in school. I didn't do well
Mhm.
with reading. I didn't do well with math. But anytime teachers could use art as a way to teach with, that really struck a chord with me. So
Right.
finally, there was a subject that I could excel in where the teacher would hold up my work
Mhm.
and share what I had done. And I could actually find pride in something that I had done in school. In fact, the one thing I was really, really good at was penmanship. So it sincerely broke my heart for a while when they took penmanship out of schools because I thought, gosh,
Uh-huh.
all those kids who are like me who need that creative outlet and
Right.
who don't find success in thinking in black and white terms are going to now struggle. So I'm
Right.
really excited when classroom teachers, even in my own building, are using art to teach with
Mhm.
because they're reaching kids who are like me. And that
Mhm.
makes me really excited and happy for those kids.
So
They only get
growing
me a
up,
little.
yeah, growing up, what did you want to be?
Oh, typical vet. Just like when I ask all my little girls, what do you want to be? A vet. And I remember my grandpa, we went to Mackinac Island where there's no cars there. I don't know if you've ever been, but
Uh-uh.
there's no cars on Mackinac Island. It's nothing but horse-drawn carriages.
Oh wow.
And my grandfather would tell me and my cousins, who also, we all wanted to be vets, that we better get used to taking a look at all the horses and all the horse doo-doo because there would be a whole lot of doo-doo shoveling in our future if that was the course that we wanted to take. That pretty much talked us all out of it. But no, my path was a little bit different. And I know a lot of educators start out being inspired by a teacher and then,
Mhm.
wanting to do the same for children or students in their life. And that was not my course. I
Mhm.
didn't have any clue what I wanted to do. I always enjoyed art, but I had such little art experience in high school. But when I went to college, I fell in love with oil painting. I just took an
Oh.
oil painting class, and I mean, it was like love at first sight. I remember just walking into that class, smelling the oil paint and the oils, and there's always coffee going in an art studio, just the smell of coffee. And I thought, this is home for me. I love
Wow.
it here. And I found something that I was really good at because college, again, academics was a struggle
Mhm.
for me. And I had a painting professor who encouraged me to pursue that path. He said, we have this painting program. It's a 2-year program. You'll have your own art studio. And this to me was like, oh my gosh, a dream come true.
Yeah.
I applied for the program and I got in. I was thrilled. The only people not thrilled, my parents, who were footing the education bill. They were like,
Right.
we're not about to pay the next 2 years of your college for you to like hole up and just paint
Mhm.
pictures. If this is what you really want to do, we will also need you to get an education degree. Why
Right.
don't you get an art ed degree? And so that's what kind of put me on that path. I essentially started down the road like as an accidental art teacher. I did it to pacify my parents because I really wanted to get that painting degree. And unfortunately, something that I learned in college, which I have decided that this is probably the biggest lie that I've ever been told, is that you have to pick a side as an artist, or even like as a music teacher or a PE teacher, or even just an educator in general. That for me, I was led to believe that I either had to become an artist or I needed to pursue art education and be an art teacher. But I was led to believe that I could not do both. And that was,
Right.
I felt like the biggest lie I'd ever learned. Because when I was in my painting classes, my professors stopped taking me seriously when they learned that I was getting an ed degree. And when I would go to
Mm.
my ed classes and I'd have sloppy lesson plans and my heart just wasn't in it, I was told, you know what, you should probably not pursue teaching because obviously this isn't your thing. So
Wow.
ultimately, when I graduated from college, I needed a job. So I decided to I got hired as an art teacher
Hmm.
and I thought, okay, this is now my path. I can't be an artist anymore. I have to focus just on teaching.
Right.
And I spent the next 7 years pouring all of my energy into teaching because I thought this is what I'm getting paid to do. And this is important. I have all of their art education of these 400 students in my hands. So I poured all of my energy into teaching, letting my creative pursuits go, which was a big mistake. It wasn't until I
Right.
experienced a really big burnout that I realized no, you can actually pursue as many paths and as many interests as you
Hmm.
have. You can do it. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to make time for it, but you can do it. And it took me so long to realize I can be an artist and I can be an art teacher. It doesn't necessarily have to look like a stereotypical, art teacher or showing in galleries in New York City. My path can look totally different.
Right.
But what I always want art teachers and everybody to know is all of those things, those notions that other people put in our heads, that's their thoughts. That's
Hmm.
their weight that they're carrying around. Don't let that, taint your thoughts. And especially me, for so many years, I let it do just that. So that's how I became, I guess, an accidental art teacher.
Well,
Not
I
to say I'm
love
not
that.
passionate about what I do, but
Well, but I love your honesty in that too, and how, sharing that at some point you were feeling burnt out by not allowing those creative juices to flow in a different way as well. But then also, just that vulnerability there. I think it's okay to say, I'm pouring everything into these kids and everything into this job, and I'm never putting anything back into me. And there comes a point where you're like, if I don't, I'm going to hit a wall and end up leaving this career because it's too much for me.
mhm.
Um, how do you pursue your own personal interests while also pouring into those kids with all the art you do?
Well, when I realized like that I hit this wall, I couldn't figure it out because I'd spent 7 years, and I'm not even kidding, reading every book I could on
Mhm.
education, classroom management, art, education. I spent every day of my summer in my room getting it organized, perfecting it every single summer. And I couldn't understand why, when August and September would hit, why I was frustrated, why I was annoyed, why I was irritated, and why I felt like I wasn't being the teacher that I wanted to be. And I realized it's because I was not happy since I'd neglected myself. I'd put so much into teaching that I hadn't taken any time for myself. And I thought, you know what? Being a creative person, and I think we're all creative people, if we don't take, I call them creative vitamins. If we don't take our creative vitamins, it's like having an iron deficiency. We experience a deficiency. We don't Something doesn't feel right, something feels off. And so I thought, you know what? Part of my becoming a better art teacher means I'm going to have to take my creative vitamins.
Hmm.
I might have to take time away from being in my room and from lesson planning. But you know what? This is all a part of that. This is what's going to make me a more well rounded teacher. So I started really pursuing anything that interests me, which, by the way, it took me a long time to figure out what I was interested in because I'd neglected my interest for 7 years. I thought, well, I liked painting. I'll just start
Right.
painting. But you know what? The love was, it was gone. I would do it and I was like, oh, this doesn't, I'm not interested anymore. And every time I picked up my paintbrush, I would hear my professors and all that negativity. And I just thought, I want a clean break.
Mhm.
So I had to spend a lot of time thinking, what do I like to do? What am I interested in creatively? And I thought of all the things I liked to do as a kid. And I thought, well, I liked to dress kind of funky. I always
Mhm.
wanted to learn how to sew my own clothing. Maybe that's where I'll go. So I slowly started to teach myself how to sew. We're sitting in my sewing room now, which
By
probably
the
cues.
way, your outfits are amazing.
Thank
My
you. I
wife
made
is
this
always
one.
coming like, "Did you see what she made here? Did you see this?" And then when you were get your teach on this summer and you were like, "I made this," I'm like, "Those are so cool! Like to have that kind of talent." I mean, I'm sure it's great to have that creative outlet.
It is. It is. And once I started like pursuing my creative outlet, that was great because I had that creative ball rolling. But then I was like frustrated again because I would want to put time into teaching, but then that took time away from creating. And I want to put time into creating, and then that took time away from teaching. And I was like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to put these two things together. And so this is my little secret. Um, I think of teaching and creating as two paths.
Mhm.
And when I can align those paths and have them run parallel, I've noticed that I can reach my teaching and my creative goal a lot faster and with greater success. So, what that means is like if I want to teach a lesson on Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, my teaching path is Van Gogh's Starry Night, and the ultimate goal is a successful lesson. And while I'm thinking of that lesson, I start thinking, well, what can I wear? Because that's my passion is fashion, and what
Mhm.
kind of crazy outfit can I make? And I start sketching out like a dress I want to make or something I want to sew or needle felt. And then suddenly I'm really excited because I'm making something. And then I'm excited to teach it because look, guys, I'm wearing a dress that lights up like Starry Night, and when I can align those two paths, then I'm scratching both of my creative and teaching itches, and I can get to where I want to be a lot faster and with success and excitement and enthusiasm, which, as we know, is contagious in our
Uh-huh.
classroom. So
I
that's
love
kind of
that.
how I figured it out for
Well,
me.
and I think that's such a cool way to look at it. I would have never thought about that, but that's the perfect way to do your professional work and enjoy it, but also bring in your own passion and still get to kind of where they're not exactly the same thing, but you're pursuing them in the same kind of route. I love that. And I'm totally stealing your creative vitamins thing because I think that is brilliant. I love you saying that. So, you talked about how school was difficult for you, art was your safe place, your the way you would write, things like that. Now being an educator, when you find those kids where art is their one moment of success during the day, their one outlet, do you find yourself like immediately drawn to them and like cultivating their gifts? Like, can you spot them like can spot yourself?
I mean, I try really hard and I can spot them. And in fact, when you say that, I can think of several kids immediately in my mind. And it's so interesting to me because these kids are so artistically or creatively gifted. And then I'll find out that they are in, the classes where they're lower readers and they're not doing so well in
Mhm.
math and their teachers are struggling with them academically. And I think, wow, that child, because they're my art genius. And so I
Right.
really try to build them up because I never want them to think of school being a place where they don't have success.
Right.
Sure, things are difficult, and we've been talking a lot this week. It's our first full week back, talking about how you might not know how to do something yet. So our word
Hmm.
right now is yet.
Hmm.
And I just think there's so many kids, like I'm thinking one little girl in particular, who the kids, when she comes to art class, they just look at her like, man, she can really do it. This is a little girl who struggles.
Mhm.
Even, I mean, even she's our little ESL friend. She struggles even with her vocabulary. She
Mhm.
struggles in other classes. So I'm just thrilled that when she comes to my room, that she has success and that the kids recognize that. But I also never want kids to say, well, she's the artist, and I don't ever
Right.
want to have one kid's, totally singled out for that reason because I want them to all know they're all artists. It's just that our idea of, what an artist looks like might be different because we're
Mhm.
all so unique. We have a
Mhm.
little catchphrase that we all say every single time we start art class, which is, I make messes, I make mistakes, but deep inside, I got what it takes. I am an artist. And I want them to all say
Oh,
that every single time they come to my room so that they know that they are an artist. Despite the messes and the mistakes, they also are an artist. So
I love that. That's
thanks.
beautiful.
That's our little catchphrase. We do a little call and response at the start of
Uh-huh.
every class. So it's
Oh.
fun.
Well, I love too the conversation that we're having about, a lot of kids sometimes are really artistic ones are not academically successful. And, as a principal, I made it a very important part of my leadership to say, if you have kids who are struggling, if you have kids that need remedial help, you are not taking them out of their art specials or this class to go and get that remedial help because you take away the one place they find
Mhm.
success, the one time they can escape. And I know that you would probably really agree with that, that yes, they may need this academic support, but if every focus goes on that and you take away the few things that might bring them joy, you're only setting them up for more failure.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and yeah, that my school is like you. My administrator is like you, where she's very supportive, and I've not had that kids taken out of classes, but I've
Mhm.
heard of other art teachers or even other specials teachers because this isn't just isolated to art. We have
Right.
some students who are extremely musically gifted or very athletic. So yeah, I'm glad that you do that, and at
Mhm.
my school, my admin, it's like a sacred time that
Yes.
does not get touched, which
Yes.
that's how it should be.
So, if there are educators or even parents who are listening to this conversation today and are looking for some easy ways to bring art into what they do, what would be some good entry points that you would recommend for them?
Well, I guess I really think going to the library and just looking at craft books. I mean, that's something that I love to pore over. Thing number one, take the phone or iPad or whatever out of their hands, please, for the love of all things holy. Because I feel like my students, even their fine motor skills
Yeah.
are, I've seen it happen, just gone by the wayside over the years. And so that's why in my room, and I know this isn't necessarily the most popular school of thought, but I don't have a lot of tech in my room.
Hmm.
I mean, the document cam and the television, me doing demos with video, that's about it. But you're not going to see my students doing this or this in my room because they're too busy with paint and clay and learning how to sew. But if you're like a homeschool mom or something like that, I say just, take them to the library, see what they're drawn to, take them to a craft store, even an inexpensive store like Walmart, and just see what supplies they are interested in, and what they're drawn to when it comes to creating. Shameless self promotion. I've written a couple of kids' craft books that
Yes, you have.
they might find of interest. One is all about clay that doesn't have to be fired in a kiln. It's called Clay Lab for Kids. Another one is all about sewing and weaving and stitching. It's called Stitch and String Lab for Kids. So, I mean, I remember my mom and dad always buying me lots of kits, like a
Mhm.
calligraphy set and a calligraphy kit or embroidery stuff, and just all those things that I love to explore.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just get things in their hands, essentially,
Yes, I love that.
regardless if it's dirty or messy, who cares?
Right.
It'll probably wash out.
Well,
So.
you're also quite popular on Instagram and you share all kinds of things. And what I really value about you and your sharing is you also share the messy stuff. You also share when you're struggling or like this wasn't working, so I had to try this, or here's what I'm going to do. It may totally fail, but I'm sharing it with you guys now. Was it ever a point where you were terrified to put your ideas out there on social media, or has it always been kind of a comfortable thing for you?
Well, when I first hit the burnout, right? And I went through that phase when I was just trying to figure out, stumbling around, trying to figure out what I wanted to create. When I finally realized that I could be both, the artist and the teacher both, it was about 2012. And I was like, okay, if this is something that I want to do, then I need to have a personal way to hold my feet to the fire.
Right.
So for me, I decided I was going to have a blog, like just a diary for me, where I would post an original lesson once a week. So that made me accountable for being creative in the lessons I was doing with my kids. I thought once a week I'll do a unique lesson that I'll share. Once a week I'll create something, or at least, share what I'm in the process of creating. And then once a week I'll, showcase what I wore that week, because I enjoy dressing kind of creatively and I like sharing that because I enjoy looking at pictures of what people wear.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started doing that and sharing, it was mostly for me initially, but eventually I was able to connect with a lot of other teachers and educators. So fast forward to now, I still blog many times a week, and I now have a podcast where I share on Instagram. So for me, I guess I've been sharing for so long,
Right.
that it kind of comes naturally, I guess, to
Mm-hmm.
do it and not really, this is just who I am. Plus, I'm like 44. So I don't really care what people think at this point. It's a beautiful thing when you hit 40 and beyond. You just stop caring what other people think, and it's great. But I do enjoy sharing because I think back to 1998 when I was in a portable trailer teaching art for the first time, not having a clue. And the only thing I had were a couple of old art teacher magazines and a library card. I had no other art teachers to turn to. I had nobody. So a lot of times when I'm sharing, I feel like I'm sharing to my former self, who was
Mm-hmm.
just desperate for any sort of help. And so now I feel like I've learned some things along the way. I've learned what works for me. And I love to share what doesn't work for me, because what I want people to know is it's all about finding your personal voice in your
Right.
classroom. Sure, you may purchase something off Teacher Pay Teacher. Sure, you may do something that other teachers, whether they be art teachers or not, are doing. But sometimes it's going to work for you, and then sometimes it's not. And
Yep.
that's okay.
Yep.
I think of it like, it's a good idea to always try to put your foot in somebody else's teacher and shoe, because it looks cool. Oh, I want to try this. I want to try that. I say try it all. But then don't feel bad if the shoe doesn't fit. I'm all about like, that didn't work for me. Kick the shoe off next. I now
Yeah.
know that I'm not a very consistent person. I'm never going to be able to keep up with art jobs. I'm never going to keep up with class rewards. I'm just not. The kids are always like, what happened to? I'm like, I don't know. So I now know it's got to be really simple and easy, and that I can stick with it. But I've tried every other thing, and that's what I've come to realize. So
I love that. I'm so the same way. That was always so hard for me to have. I always wanted to be the teacher that did all those kind of things, and I'm like, I just can't keep up with it. But
no.
I'm wondering, do you ever find yourself, you've had so much success. People may know you even got to be on a Netflix show, a cooking show where you got to try that creativity route. Do you ever find yourself still sometimes having that doubt creep in where you begin to think, am I doing it good enough? Am I good enough? Like, do you still fight those battles?
Oh, every day. I think every day. And I think that when a teacher stops like fighting those battles, or even stops questioning themselves or thinking, then maybe it's time to retire. I
Right.
really do. I honestly think that, I mean, every single day I'm like, how can I improve this? And it's exhausting, but the reason we think that is because we're passionate about it,
Right.
and
So
with
how do
30
you
minute art
not,
class,
oh, go ahead. 30-minute art
well,
classes.
with 30-minute art classes for kindergarten through fourth, it's back to back to back.
Oh,
Like today I had 3 hours of 30-minute classes back to back in my afternoon. And it's like your head's spinning because it's first grade, third grade, fourth grade, or maybe it was vice versa. I don't even know who I saw today. We'll just put it that way. But it's tough because you just think there's so much that I want to teach them. You have such a limited amount of time. How can I pack it all in? And then you realize you just can't. So you just got to do your very best and hope that that's good enough. But ultimately, as long as you're letting them know that they're safe, that they're cared for, that you love them. I think that's like my overarching theme. Do they know who
Right.
painted the Mona Lisa? Some of them do. Some of them we're never going to know, despite the fact that we might talk about it every day. But, we just got to keep trying our best and just, finding out what's the best for our students, for us, our setup, and our situation, I think.
So, what is something, when you think back on your life, what is something that you think was a really defining moment that helped create the person you are today?
Ooh, that's a that's a deep question. Oh boy,
And I'm
let's
sure there's all
see.
kinds of things, but what is something that comes to your mind that you're like, yeah, this definitely played a part in who I am today?
I think, and this is going to sound funny because um, it's like my own personal spin on this as an adult. So when I was a kid, um, there were stock car races in Joliet, Illinois. My dad would take me to go see the stock car races. And this was in the mid 80s, early 80s. And during intermission, they would clear all the stock cars off of the track and they would have us bring our big wheels. I don't know if you know what a big wheel is. You have to be an 80s kid to know.
Uh-huh.
It had two
Yes.
small wheels, and it was like a trike, but on steroids. It had two small plastic wheels in the back and one big wheel in the front. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did you have one?
Yes.
It was like this, right? You were riding
Yeah.
like Hell's Angels. So, and if I remember, I went through like three of them because if you rode them too long, the plastic tire would get a hole
Hmm.
in it, and then
Hmm.
rocks would get inside and it'd make this really cool rumble sound. So during intermission, they would have big wheel races for kids. And I got to be really good at it. I was nothing but legs. And so I would like fly through and I had a lot of trophies. And
Hmm.
I remember, not to brag, but I was the big wheel champion of Joliet, Illinois in the 80s. But my dad would have this little get me pumped up conversation with me every time right before a race. And he meant this literally. But I think of this now as an adult figuratively. And I love this, although he did not mean it in this way at all. He would tell me before every race, I want you to get out there. I want you to pedal as fast as you can. And I don't want you to look back at all. Do not look back and see who's behind you. Don't look at the competition. Just focus and go as fast as you can. And I think that to me as an adult means focus on what's important to you
Right.
and just keep pushing toward that. And I feel like with social media, so
Hmm.
many of us are
Hmm.
looking back over our shoulder. So
Hmm.
many of us get caught up in that comparison trap of what is this person doing? Should I be doing that? And
Right.
we get so distracted from our personal goals that
Mhm.
some of us, you know, it can even take us away from even figuring out what our goals are. We'll confuse our goals with what other people are pursuing or doing. So I think that
Right.
that's something that I struggle with a lot, and I have to really make sure I stay focused on my goals. Sometimes I don't know what they are. Sometimes they change every single day, but I need to keep my eye on that and not
Mhm.
always on my eye on this. It's okay to be inspired by that, but
Right.
don't get distracted and off course because of it.
I think that is the perfect way to end this episode. Cassie, I've followed you online. My wife has been a fan for a long time. When you came up on our Netflix, she was like, oh my God, I know who that is. I follow her on Instagram. And I was like, let me check her out. And then when I got to meet you face to face at Get Your Teach
That
On,
was fun.
you were one of the sweetest people. Immediately, I got to sit in your session. It was amazing. My sister-in-law watched you for like 3 hours and was like, can I just listen to her all day long? So she was like, tell her I said hello. She has no idea who I am, but I want her to know. But you are just, not only are you full of creativity, but I love how you have such a genuine heart and are such a person who cares for others and cares for kids and are just looking to never amplify you or your voice, but just to share your heart and your passion with others. And so
Aw,
when you agreed to come on, I was so thrilled. I look up to you and admire you, and I'm so glad I got to meet you. So thank you so
oh,
much for coming
stop.
on this show too.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. So
Well,
thank you.
Yes, and I want to thank everybody for listening or watching. We got a lot of comments today too. People listening or watching. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Cassie. And remember, you can check out any past episodes on iTunes or SoundCloud or YouTube. And now it's also up on Google Play and Spotify if you want to listen to the podcast there. Make sure you check out next week's episode with another brand new guest. And if you want to leave a review on iTunes, I'd appreciate that. Hopefully today's conversation, you gained something and it inspired you to get out there and tell your story, because like I tell you every week, every story matters. Have a great evening.